Carolyn Doobie here. What's the play for today? Well, today I'm playing around with the Art Grip watercolor pencil and Pitt pens. Now, here's the thing. Water is in the name of this pencil, so you'd think, of course, there would be water involved, right? Well, not exactly. I'm not going to use water. I'm going to use glaze with this. And as long as I had the glaze out, I thought, I want to mix this Pitt pen color with the glaze too. And you're going to see how I do that without risking the pen in any way, shape, or form. Now these three flowers are about to get some color added to them, and yes, of course, this technique would work well with flowers that you've drawn yourself, or anything that you've drawn, as well as things like coloring books or clip art. So starting with the Art Grip watercolor pencil, I am simply tracing over the lines that are there. I'm just doing a single sort of straight line right along there. I'm not doing everything. I'm not exactly staying on the line. It just gives me a ballpark place to put this, but I'm kind of hiding it on top of the lines that were already there. And after I finish this flower, I'm going to do it to the other flowers on the page. Now, instead of putting water on this watercolor pencil that I've drawn, I'm using the glaze. So I just dip that brush right in there, and then I am sort of scribbling, scrunching, not being very careful or delicate about this, and smearing the color with the glaze. One of the side benefits of using a glaze to mix with the Art Grip watercolor pencils is that it also seals it. So once the glaze is dry, this stuff is sealed in there and it won't react again to water. Now, glaze is a sticky substance, so if you leave it on your brush, it will definitely gum up and dry out your brush. That's why I have a cup of water right there to remind me as soon as I'm finished using the glaze, I'm going to put it immediately in the water. That way none of it has time to dry on the brush, and by leaving it sitting in the water, it will make it much easier to clean when I'm all finished with this project. Next, I'm going to take a Pitt pen and one of the big brush pens, and I am just going to scribble some of it right on the transparency to transfer some of the color over. I'm going to take my brush, going to dry off the excess water, dip in the glaze, and run it right into that color. Now I've got a very translucent, soft color here that I can put on the edge of my flower. So it's going to look like I very carefully shaded this in, and not really. You can see that there's no precision here. I'm just kind of pulling it in. When you need more color, you just scribble on a new spot and then dip it right in the glaze and repeat. And you'll notice as I'm doing this, when I add the Pitt pen onto the transparency, that I'm putting it in a different spot than last time, because the wet glaze on the tip of a Pitt pen is not a good thing for your pen. That's why I'm using the transparency to help me out. And that's why I'm always going to go to a different spot on the transparency. That way I never get any of the glaze onto the actual pen tip. And of course, you can alter the vibrancy and intensity of this by how much pigment you put on there from the Pitt pen and how much glaze you have. So a lot of glaze and a little bit of color, it's going to be much softer. If there's a lot of color from the Pitt pen and just a little bit of glaze, it's going to be more intense. So that way you can get the look that you want with it. Now, what if you don't have a piece of transparency around that you can use? If you've got anything that's a solid plastic, basically something that won't absorb. You just want something that won't absorb the Pitt pen. That way it'll stay floating on the top and you can mix it right away with the glaze. Now, I totally forgot about that little flower bud over there. Oops. But there's an opportunity in that, because now I can show you when I might use one of the other brush tip pens, the smaller regular size ones, compared to the big brush. Now, with the big brush, when you put it on there, it's a bigger brush, so you get a lot more. You can see with that one, it's a smaller brush, and so there was less color on the transparency. And that's the only difference for doing this technique, whether it's the regular size brush tip or whether it's the big brush. So I'm putting a lot of yellow here on the transparency because I want to make sure that it's vibrant, that it's bold, that it pops. And that's one of the cool things about this, is you really can alter how intense it is based on how much of that pigment you put on the transparency versus how much glaze you use. I'm going to come in with green and some glaze, and I'm going to finish up the stems and the leaves here. And of course, as soon as I'm finished using that brush and the glaze, I'm going to get it right in the water to make sure that it doesn't dry on the brush. Well, thank you for joining me for today's play, and thank you for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.